Welcome to Schmidt List, where we inspire and educate emerging leaders by bringing you conversations with the best experts and thought contributors in technology and design. Thank you for joining us today. Now let's listen in as your host, President at Foundry Kurt Schmidt, speaks with this episode's inspiring leaders.
Sherri, how are you today?
Good. I'm happy to be here. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing fantastic, especially now that you're here. So tell me a bit about the work you do, Sherri, and who you do it for.
Sure. Thanks for, again, being here. And I love how your book is, just before I go into that, all about the one conversation, right? And that's what led us in our conversation. So, you just don't know who someone else knows. I think it's fantastic. And I love that model. And you live it and breathe it. And so do I. So that's why we get along.
That's great. That's great.
So in short, my husband and I are the Lou Everett Group, and my name is Sherri McManus. And we are leadership development and corporate trainers. And we specifically focus on leadership development and effective communication for small businesses. So we do that by providing direct strategies to help build leaders from within and also to prevent toxic work cultures. So we love transforming today's leaders, and that is our true and passion of what we do.
Yeah. Well, and it's the thing is I work in technology, and I used to think technology could solve all the problems, but turns out that communication is probably the number one cause of any problem. Is that right, Sherri?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Communication is hard, Sherri. It's so challenging. Why can't people just read my mind and understand what I need? So with the world, I've talked about this on the show a bunch this year, but we've got a lot of ups and downs in the world. We've got debt ceilings. We've got crazy Canadian wildfires choking half the country. There's a lot going on. And I think the leaders are challenged because they're not having to deal with the problems at work, but they're also having to deal with whatever the employees are bringing with them as part of how they're impacted by the way the world is going. And so one of the things that I wanted to talk to you focused on is that in order, it seems, to build that good communication, we got to have trust with people. But if what the age we're living in, trust is kind of far and few between, where does a leader start, in your opinion, by addressing trust?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a loaded question.
On purpose.
I know. Well, it's funny because we're at a different level. You and I and the folks are most likely listening to this on some level. Everybody's at a different level, and that's okay. Mm-hmm. But we're at a different awareness level. So when you and I are talking about trust and, how trust is a big deal, not many people understand, well, what does that trust mean? Right? That they didn't scratch that surface yet. And somebody that along our in communication and networking taught me right out of the gate was like, listen, it boils down to businesses, no matter big or small, two things: people and process. And then underneath that is trust. Right? We can't go in guns blazing and just be like, woo-hoo, like you have a trust issue. Well, that's all well and good. And I know other coaches that do that. Good for them. Yeah. But a lot of people don't have that level of awareness. Not yet, anyway. We know the symptoms, and that's what you're getting at. It's like, what is this all about? What is the trust? So there are tons of symptoms that we all can relate to, which is one boils down to communication. But what is that symptom, right? Like, what is that? Well, that comes with a lot of angst, and that comes, can we be our whole self? Can we be our authentic self, right? There's a lot of talk about that. Can we be our true self? Do we need to mask who we truly are? Do we need to tiptoe around what I really want to say? And there's lots of folks that just don't know how to communicate if something doesn't jive with them to be in a positive manner. We don't need to be like, I have grandchildren that just because they don't like something, they yell and scream, right? We need to kind of work with that and be like, okay, well, in a work environment, that's not going to fly. It's those skill sets, right? So we're missing back. The point is that we're missing back these, we call them power skills, right? The compassion, which will eventually come with the trusting, but communications aspect. Once upon a time, we used to call these, right? The good old soft skills. they're not soft by no means.
Right.
No, this is what the world needs. Right.
Yeah.
So just getting back to a quick symptom, right, is about navigating politics. Right. Well, that's always a top one. But a big one is conflict resolution. How do we go through that, but in a caring manner and not finger pointing people? Right. And that person's a jerk and this, that.
Well, I'm glad you bring that up because it's something that all managers that I've managed in the past have some sort of trouble with is conflict resolution or having a difficult conversation. Right.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Because you're not really taught how to do that. It's not a curriculum usually in most schools.
Right. Right. And besides, like I'm going to take you outside. Yes.
Right. Exactly. Well, because for me, my experience has been is I love to have face-to-face conversations when it is about an important subject. And but what I've noticed is different generations prefer different communication styles. Some don't like that because they need time to process things. So they prefer more digital communication or some other sort of form for that sort of stuff. But for me, context is really key to make sure I'm getting the context across because I have a trouble creating or feeling like I can create a safe space for people unless I can give that context to the conversation I'm having. What's your usual advice, Sherri, when it comes to having those difficult conversations or having challenging conversations when you still, you want to build trust, right?
Mm-hmm. Right. So the first thing, there's actually something that we teach regarding this, a piece of this anyway. It's actually called care. And I won't go into all of it, but the first part is to actually care for the other person, but and compassion. But before you even get to that is to listen, is to zip it. And that is a solution, even if it's in a conflict resolution, or you're just trying to build the trust that we're talking with, building a team, this goes through not just work, but also to your friends and family as well. So is to actually be a good listener. And we need to listen with our ears. And that's why we have 2 ears, right?
Yeah.
And
we listen twice as much, right?
Right.
Yep.
And it sounds so simple, right? I mean, this isn't anything that we haven't heard of before. But the question is, how well are you doing it? And unfortunately, we are not doing it very well because statistics and articles, and if you're in this industry, gosh, there is tons of it out there saying that we are doing a horrible job.
Yeah. And
I have a personal story because of partly of that, where with leadership was a toxic work environment and landed myself in the hospital. So this was pre-pandemic. This was all during the pandemic. So listening is, if anything out of this podcast right now, if your listeners, is to listen before you make a reaction and go on emotion and go on the finger pointing and you this and you that. Like just for a moment, listen and put yourself in that other person's shoes for just a moment.
Yeah, it's really important. I found that exactly what you're saying. You have to remove sort of yourself from the conversation or your whatever agenda or things that you might have in order to truly be present and be a good listener in those things. And that is challenging for some people to be able to do that. It really takes time and practice. And so I get a lot of people saying to me, well, what books should I read, Sherri? What books should I read that are going to help me be a better manager and be a better leader? And I always tell them experience is the best book that you can consume. There is some good books out there, but as my dad always said, there's 2 kinds of people in the world. There's people who have a coach and there's people who don't know they need a coach.
Yeah.
And when people show up to your work and what are they asking for usually? And is it do they know what they even need?
That's a good question. Yes. That's so funny that you say that because again, it goes back to those symptoms, right? It's just like, well, I want to be this. This is my end result, but then how do I get there? And that's the beauty about what we do. And of course you do as well. When you have these conversations, I hate calling them discovery calls because it's good. But I mean, you're discovering what it's truly the underlying current is, but it's really just focusing and having conversation.
Sure.
And that's where listening comes in. Yeah. And be like, okay, well, I heard you say this. Is this accurate? And then having it repeated back, it could be like, oh yeah, that's exactly what I need. Or be like, no, not quite. I'm like, okay, can you please clarify?
Mm-hmm. Right? You gotta be that good listener.
Yeah, I know. It all goes back to that. It really does. And I'm not a perfect at it. I always have to really be intentional on
sure.
really focusing on every conversation. And that takes a lot of energy. It just does.
It does. There's a lot of, and that's the thing I tell people, like, gotta build your skills in emotional labor when it comes to managing, because like you said, you have to put a lot on your shoulders when it comes to that. Not only the other person's, but your own, because you got to shelve your emotions for a while, and that can get heavy without expressing them over and over again. But it's funny you bring up that part about people saying, "Oh yeah, that's what I need." I mean, there's so many times where I've had a leader contact me and they're like, "I really want to help this person on my team. They're just doing terrible and all that." And usually my first question is, should you just fire them? Right. Maybe it's not coaching, but I always throw it out there because I want to understand, are you just avoiding the inevitable
right.
when it comes to this? Because I'm sure, Sherri, you've gotten into coaching sessions with small businesses and things and found that one kind of toxic or that one bad apple that's in the group. As a leader, we want to build trust with our team. And I think one of the important things that with our team is that they know that you are paying attention, you are listening. And if they see you sidestepping toxic people or these other things, that's going to really hurt with building trust with you as a leader, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And you can actually go to the other employees and part of your team, and you can ask them who was the best performer and who was the worst performer. And they will flat out will tell you.
Yeah.
But here is the responsibility as a leader. And here's the thing, like as a leader, it can be a burden. It really can be. And not everybody's cut out to be a leader, and that is okay. We need leaders, and we also need followers and good followers. Mm-hmm. So if you're listening to this, don't be like, oh, wow, I wish I could be that way, or I want to be a leader. But it's okay if you don't have that kind of like fire in you. It's okay. It's okay to actually work side by side with a leader, and you can anytime you can just pull that vision down and then go for it and then help and then, just be that cheerleader for the rest of your team.
Right.
With that. So getting to your point, you shouldn't sidestep if there is a blatant, rotten bad apple and they're getting away with certain things. We see that a lot in the sales world where you have a high performer and they're doing so well, right?
Yeah. And they're the squeaky wheel.
Yeah. But yet they're doing some unethical things in order to get to it. See, that's not right. I've been in several environments that way. It was proven and they got caught and they were, so it showed the door. But unfortunately, the damage is left with some folks with that. And there's team morale issues that come out of it, lots of stress with it. So as a leader, you really have to take that seriously and just be like, well, something's going on. Let's kind of nip this before it gets even worse. And unfortunately, in both cases, because they were high producing, it took a while before it finally left.
No, I find that interesting because one of the lessons I learned early as a leader was it wasn't just how I was addressing the issues that individual might have, but how they perceived how I was addressing other more global issues with the organization that contributed to the amount of trust that I could build with that person. Because it would be, again, like they say, right? Like words mean only so much, but people really pay attention to actions too. How do you do that? Because as a coach, you're coming in and you can only do so much. You can only do so much, and then they need to go and actually execute on some of these things. What are some tactics or things that you found that have helped you create these better leaders from an action oriented standpoint?
Mm-hmm. Yes. So really for when you're building a leader, even for myself, leading comes from the inside out. Again, to your point earlier, you can read all the best books in the world. Yes, you can have these wonderful experiences and not so wonderful experiences, but we still need to nurture ourselves.
Yeah.
And if you can just go off on just because of it's always been this way, or this is how I got taught, you're really limiting yourself.
Yeah.
And not only are you limiting yourself, but then you're limiting your team that you want to influence so they can get even better production. So when we start with our folks in either a new management or even a C-suite level, we tell them this is your personal time. You need personal development.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's the first time they're hearing this, and others are like,
sure.
yeah, I probably should do that. Right? Well, why aren't you? Right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, pick up a book, right? And read at least a page or two when you're on, if you're fortunate enough to have a small break.
Yeah, you got to invest.
Yeah, you got to invest into that. And that's the biggest growth that I have done is, I've heard this before. And it's like I kicked the can further along and I'm like, oh boy, my road ran out. I'm going to have to do some digging. And that's where that turned around a lot better so I can help more people. Yeah. Right. So think about like a big old present, right? We get the excitement of getting the present for someone. We wrap it in the bow, the pretty little thing, everything, and then not giving it to anyone. And you just keep it. Like, whoa, like that's almost selfish, right? Yeah. No, give it. Get that knowledge and nurture yourself with it. And it's not being selfish. This is actually bettering yourself so you can help others as well. Right? You have to dig first to, dive deep a little.
I love that metaphor. I do because it's advice. It's a beautiful way of packaging sort of the advice that I give people too, which is if you're holding back, you're actually kind of messing with other people, because if you're not sharing and building that sort of thing. But to your earlier point, I've had one of my best bosses many years ago said, if you can't lead yourself, you can't lead other people, right? Mm-hmm. To your point, if you're not investing in yourself, then how can you be perceived as somebody who can invest in others?
Yes.
Do you find that that with these leaders, does it matter the makeup of the company or the size of the company? Is there any difference between a 20-person company or a 200-person company that you've seen in terms of problems?
Yeah, it's funny because there's some people that you talk to, here's the startups, right? When you have the progression of a business, the startups have their own issues. And then when you move into like 5 to 10, then you have a little bit more issues. And then it just kind of grows from there. Mm-hmm. But if you really think about it, there's always the underlying current of the same themes. So I don't care if you're a startup company or you're a Fortune 500 company, you still have communication issues.
Right.
And
right.
It's either verbal or it's actually written. It's texting. How do you communicate to another department now that your team has grown, right? Yeah. Your team may communicate one way and be funny, ha, but then as soon as you go to another department that you need them in here to fill your processing, then all of a sudden it doesn't look so ha.
Right.
And I had that. And the reason I say that is because I'm thinking about the manufacturing companies that we've been through is exactly that happened when we're talking about communication and written communication and texting. And one gentleman was like, oh, I didn't know that capitalization was yelling, so like, really. And of course, it was funny, but he really honestly didn't know.
Oh, sure.
We're like, wow. I was like, yeah, we should tone that down a little.
Yeah. Stop screaming at people. Well, I'm glad you bring that up because a lot of the leaders I see, especially when they're new, it seems that they kind of have to go through this transition. And let's talk about the people pleasers, Sherri, because I think there's a lot of people that get into leadership because they are kind of natural people pleasers, right? But then all of a sudden they find that in that leadership position that the people pleasing part is not an important skill to have in that. Can you talk me through a little bit about that transition? Because I'm sure you've had to coach people that are sort of in the people pleasing aspect and maybe need to break out of that. What's some of your advice for those folks that are aware of that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So first off, you do need to be aware if you are a people pleaser. And I can reflect even if early in my career in managing others and leading others. Yeah, I secretly do want them to make sure everybody's happy. And do they like me? So I get it. I think that's super common when you have that level of awareness over, when you're working with people, just in general, you want people to like you. I think that is the human nature. We want people to like us and we want to be involved and feel connected to other folks, right? Well, here's the thing. That's a fine line when you're trying to lead others. Now, you could still have that quality, but now think of it as how can I serve others and so they can look even better, so they don't even have time if they like you or hate you or hurt anything. Like you want to give so much to someone else to shine that you're so distracted with that and focusing on that piece of it is no longer your kind of like a crutch or your go-to or worry of like, oh, do they like me? Do they not like me? I am so focused on my team and my individual to do so well that I'm so passionate about it, right? I want you to do well. Like, and that will exude and they're going to, I don't know. I mean, I think about some of the managers I've worked with that are very firm, but yet they still cared. Mm-hmm. And that's the biggest thing. They want to know that you have their back no matter what. Going, hey, listen, you really messed up here, but let's talk about the opportunities and let's never do that again. Be like, okay.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Because find out.
Well, that's what I found early because one of my earliest my first management thing, I was like, if I make everybody my friend, then they're going to want to do things for me because that's how the world works. And boy, that was terrible. It was a horrible experience. But what I found is that they were there because they wanted growth. And so I was the kind of the first point of growth for them. And if I wasn't giving them honest feedback, or if I wasn't giving them course correcting them and then giving them praise along with areas that they could improve, it wasn't helping them grow. And so they would exit the organization because I can leave an organization where I'm friends with everybody. That's fine. Right. But if it's difficult to leave an organization where I feel like there's true opportunity for growth and that I'm improving, I'm getting better at my job. I might even be becoming a leader myself, or all the opportunities that the organization might be providing are not necessarily just based on your job description.
Right. Mm-hmm. Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. And also too, I found too, if somebody is more buddy on that level and they do have that title for, right. And they are supposed to, you are their direct report, but you become too buddy, that there goes a lack of respect.
Yeah.
And they're just like,
which will erode trust really fast, right?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And I saw that firsthand where the one gentleman in particular was taking out a few of his buddies they love to drink and they went to the bar, or they just come over the house or something. And it was very buddy, which again, there's a fine line with that. And unfortunately, when it was in a work situation and they're like, hey man, you really need to do X, Y, Z and bring up the level of the expectations, just like everybody else, it was like, it'll be all right. He'll let me slide. Right. And it didn't, the lack of respect there and to get work done was suffered.
And to your point, other people notice this. And that's the one thing that I found erodes trust very quickly. And I kind of mentioned it earlier when I talked about how maybe you sidestep bad apples, but it's also just, you don't understand how I tell people, like, once you're a manager, you're kind of, you go from being just an average, like an average size, like a dog to like an elephant. Like you're big now. And when you show up, you take up a lot of space in people's minds and in terms of the words that you're saying. People are paying closer attention because you're louder now, even though your voice hasn't changed at all. But, that's the one thing with new leaders I have to remind them is like, you have this larger presence now that you have to be careful of, because to your point, if you're only taking a couple of team members to lunch every day and not paying attention to the whole team, people notice that. And you can have all the excuses you want, right? Of like, well, I used to work with them at this other place, or, I'm trying to help this one person or whatever. But these cues you're giving off are huge to the rest of the team and to your boss or your boss's boss or your great grandboss or whoever. People pick up on these visual and audio and whatever cues. And I think that's something that I find such a challenge in coaching people through when they're on my teams, is having them understand sort of as a new manager, the weight that they now carry. Do you find, what are other, is that a challenge that you see? And what are other challenges you see that new managers maybe have to focus on in an organization?
Yeah, so that was a great point. You're right. There are some folks that just take it upon themselves and they'll take out only a few people and not the rest. And then they're not aware that, hey, actions speak louder than words. So you do need to be careful. And then that's where the leadership comes in, as far as it could be a burden, right? Like it just, everything has a meaning. Everything that you say, everything that you do, everything that you don't do speaks volumes. So you really have to be considered. And that's why it's so important to have a mentor and a coach with you. Have somebody either in the organization that's a few steps higher than you, so to speak, like in career wise. I don't mean title wise, but like maybe career, like, oh yes, I've been there, done that. And it's great for a mentor. So you can go navigate these potholes. And that's why having a coach. And that's why a few people have, that's why recently, that you were just talking this off air, that I've had some folks that got to that point finally said, you know what, I'm tired of hitting these potholes. I need some one-on-one coaching to help myself, and then I can help lead up and also lead my team as well. So we talk about this, but we're leading with influence here. You can be friendly with people. You can really do that, but just make sure it's on an even keel for everyone.
Right.
For example, just a really great way that always seems to work, hands down, is that when you are working with a team, make sure that you have very clear messaging and very clear expectations of what everybody's role is. Like, hey, this is our team, up or down, we all take the brunt here, right? And let's work together, but also taking them out individually and following through. Don't say it and then don't follow through. That I hate that. So, that bothers me. Coffee or something, and take them and actually have a conversation and find out a little bit about them on a personal level. And I'm not saying that you need to know every ounce of their personal life. I don't think anybody really wants that, but to find out what really makes them tick.
You're right.
Then you'll discover what motivates them. And then you'll find out when it comes down to the work, hey, I understand that family is so important to you, and time and having that, your extra PTO time is really important. So let's see if we can get this out by 2:00 so you can have the rest of the afternoon off. How about that? Right? Yep. So those are the little things that help. And then as a leader, you have to remember that and be like, oh yeah, this person really values their family. This person over here is trying to get maybe more of an education. This person's doing a side hustle. Rock on. There's so many different ways and facets. There's no one size fits all with it. And we have to stop using that playbook and really look at people as the holistic portion of this. Yeah.
Right. And how the work contributes to that holistic life that they're having. Right. And again, that's the thing I tell leaders, is that the more that you can get into those grooves, the more you're going to enjoy being a leader. because you're going to see the impact that you actually have with folks, because people forget jobs, people forget projects, they never forget their bosses, right?
Right. Exactly. And you want people that come work with you because they want to work with you, not because they have to.
Yeah.
And having that fear-based environment and a culture is awful. It's absolutely awful. And if we've learned anything from the pandemic, is not to have that anymore. And we really need to care for our individuals.
We do.
At all costs. It really do.
Well, and the last thing I want to ask you about is vulnerability, because this is one challenge that I run into with a lot of leaders when I have conversations with them, is that in order to create a safe space, one of the easiest ways that I've seen is by showing up vulnerable yourself first before you ask somebody to be vulnerable with you, right? So I see you're having challenges in the job. I had your job once, and I also experienced a lot of challenges, and here's the things that I screwed up. Where are you feeling that you could be improving? So, but I have people sometimes, and I wouldn't say push back, but they question it, saying, but shouldn't I be kind of an oak? Shouldn't I be stoic and be unflappable and show them that the leader has everything covered? And I think that's a challenge, because if they figure out that I don't know what the hell I'm doing, then they're not going to respect me, and they're not going to listen to the things I have to say. So what would be your advice to that person, Sherri?
Yeah, that's a really great point, especially as a new manager, because we feel, and this impression that leaders have to have it all. They have to be that oak. That's a great description. And we have to have all the answers. And I think that I believe, and we've seen this, is that really is to, one, be aware of like, oh, I don't have to be that way. Yes, we need to be the calm in the storm. That's what we believe in. But to really understand that, hey, you know what? I don't have all the answers, but that's okay, because I'm going to get you the answer. And that's where having your connections, having the relationships with people are so key. So don't think that leadership is your own little island and yay, I got to the peak of the mountain. I mean, if you're the only one on that mountain, you did a horrible job. I'm sorry. You did a horrible job. You forgot to turn around and forgot to hand it out your hand so you can help that other person up there.
That's a really don't good. Be lonely. Yeah. It should be a big happy group around you.
It should be. And delegation is huge. And that's another thing. It's a control factor. Like, stop being controlling. You don't have to have every answer under the sun. It's okay to be, you know what? I don't know that answer, but I'm going to get that answer for you. And I'm going to come right back, and I'm going to follow up with you. And then really, truly follow up. And then that's where you build trust with people. That I found. I mean, I had to learn that on too, because I felt the same way. I was just 100%. Like, oh, I have to have an answer. Meanwhile, I'm like sweating bullets. I'm like, I don't know,
Right. And that's the thing that stops people, right? Because what if I get into a situation where I don't know something, then they're going to know that I don't know stuff, Sherri.
Right. I know.
What do I do? What do I do?
Just be like, hey, we're human. No, we're human beings at the end of the day, and we're emotional creatures at the end of the day. We really are. So we have to keep that as a factor. And if we don't take ourselves too seriously, and just kind of laugh, be like, oh, you know what? It's really good. I don't know, but I'm going to find out that answer for you. And I'm going to follow that up. And that's what part of being transparent is all about.
Right.
People communicate differently, and being transparent, which is a good buzzword right now. But yes, people want to, they really don't want to see the perfectness. I think people are, what I'm seeing, they're tired of seeing that perfection. Because it's perfect. We're all broken people.
It doesn't exist. And so they don't believe it in the first place. Right. Back to your point about building trust. Right.
Yep. Yeah. We're all broken people, and we have to accept that. But we all are trying to do our best under the circumstances and what we're dealing with for that.
I love it. That's a perfect way to end the show today, Sherri. I really enjoyed your time today. So if I want to know more about Sherri and the work that you do, where's a great place to go and visit? Where are you most active? Where can I find out more info in order to get some of that fantastic coaching you do, Sherri?
Sure, absolutely. Thanks for the opportunity. It's been a blast with you. But yes, feel free. We love to have a conversation with you. Reach out. I am heavily on LinkedIn. So LinkedIn is my go-to, but I'm also on Facebook as well. And you can reach out to our website at loueverettgroup.com and look us up. We're there. Happy to have a connection and let's have a conversation.
Great. I love it. Well, Sherri, thank you again so much for joining me. I really appreciate it. And we'll have to do a part 2 in the future.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much for your time.
We hope you join us for more conversations in the future with leading experts in technology and design. Please contact us at schmidt-list.com and foundrymakes.com for more information.